Hey there, McAllister here with Toasty DIY, and today I'm doing a quick video over embroidery. This is going to show you what you need to have to start, what you might want to have to start, and then just some quick beginner tips on how to start stitching. This is going to take you from literally nothing to hopefully something like making a silly little design on a shirt like here, or starting on your own little fabrics. So this is my setup here. We're going to be looking down from this little thing here going forward. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. We're going to try to do this pretty quick. Alrighty, so this should be the overhead setup. I'm just going to go ahead and show you the things that you absolutely need to get started. So the first thing is very obvious. You need a needle. So you can buy an embroidery needle at places like Hobby Lobby. You can actually get a set of them. So when it comes to a needle, you just need one that you can thread through, and that's going to be your first thing. So needle first. We'll set that here. The next thing you're going to need is some sort of yarn or some sort of string to go ahead and start with. When you go to Hobby Lobby, all this was in one place, so it makes it really easy, but you're looking for something like this. You might even find a pack of something like this. We can start with that, and then the next thing you need to start will be some sort of hoop. You could technically do it without this, but I would just go ahead and say it's as far as being mandatory. This is very necessary to hold the shirt steady or the fabric steady as you start. And then the last thing you need is a pair of scissors. Just something small. You can buy these right in that same aisle, and this will let you start. So if you just wanted to go right now, you could get these things and then go. What we're gonna do is go ahead and look at some items that you might want that'll make this easier. So let's go ahead and get this out of the way. So moving on to items you want, you can go ahead and get something like this. This is called the needle threader, and I'll show you how this works. It's got a very thin little piece of metal here you'll be able to see the light off of. And this is used to thread your string through the needle, makes it a lot easier. This was about $5, I believe, and for me, absolutely worth it. Next, you might want a tin. You can get a pin cushion or this. This helps carry all my needles, so it's nice and easy. You're gonna need something to sew on. If you wanna practice, you can buy fabric like this at the store, really cheap. I think this was maybe $2 for about this much, and I can probably get about 8 different sections of fabric out of this. You might wanna get a ruler just to measure straight lines in case you need to. This is like a little magnet one. I can extend out, measure how much I need, and then pop it back in the bag. And lastly, I think the most important thing, I don't know why I saved it for last, is a water-soluble marker, pen, or pencil. I go ahead and get this one, the pen, because it was easier. It's like a Sharpie. You just kind of write it out, but then you can run through some water and it comes out. This is very important if you're not very artistic like myself. What you can actually do is take your phone and put it underneath the fabric once it's stretched through this, like the inside of your shirt, or this on top. And when it's all stretched out, you can put a phone underneath of it and then easily trace out your design. Or if you're doing it on fabric like this, you can actually trace your design before you even put the hoop on, if you'd like to. Just something that can help you out really well. And then when you're done, you can go ahead and wash this out with water. Or if you use chalk, obviously water will still get it out, however you want to do it. But something to mark your designs, especially if you're not good at art like myself. All right, the only way to begin is by beginning. So what we're gonna do is start by grabbing a hoop, and you're gonna undo this right here, get it all undone. This way it pops out, and you'll see there's kind of a crease along here. This is what's gonna hold the tension when we put a shirt or any fabric between here. So now I've got 2 parts. You'll want something the size of this. So I'm gonna hold this over. I'll do this for better visual. I'm gonna cut this out, and this is what's gonna go inside this hoop. And I need it to be taut and very tight, so I'm gonna cut a pretty small amount here, but I'm just gonna go ahead and that off. So now that I've got this cut out, I make sure that it's big enough to fit in here. It is. So what you're gonna do is put this beneath it, cover it up, and then your goal is put this over top of that ring underneath. And when you do, it should kind of push in, and then go ahead and grab and pull every area you can through best you can to try to make sure it's as tight as possible. I actually would recommend having more here. Some of it's kind of coming up because I cut short, and if it causes me a problem, I'll go get more fabric. All right, once it's a basic level tight, just go ahead and start pulling through, make sure. All right, so I've tightened this as best I can. Honestly, I could get a little bit tighter if I had more fabric, but I'm not too worried about it. Or if the fabric was thicker, if you have problems with it being too thin and you're just trying to cross stitch, you can always do more than one piece to make sure it's tighter. But we're gonna go ahead and look at how to do some basic stitches. This is to start, but before you can stitch, you need to go ahead and get your needle, and you need to go ahead and thread on some yarn. We're gonna go ahead and look at that. Your yarn may be too big for your needle. If you're not sure, you can always look at your needle, and there's gonna be different sizes for the eyes. When you have them next to each other, it's gonna be really easy to tell. It's gonna be very hard for me to show on this camera what size this needle is. But this needle can take around one of these full things, but if not, you can always take the ends here and then separate them by strands. And you can look here and see, maybe you want to do 3 strands, and usually these ones you get at Hobby Lobby are 6 strands. So you can go ahead and separate 3 and 3 and actually double how much you can get out of this. So for this one, I think we're gonna go ahead and use the whole thing. but I want you to know that you can separate these, and there's some tricks and tips you'll learn to that as you do it. It can get complicated, but the one thing that's important is if you don't keep tension on the pulling side and then the separating sides at the same time. I usually have one of them in my mouth, one of them in my other hand, and one in the finger, trying to keep it as tight as possible. So that way they don't wrap around themselves, causing it to get all bundled up. And we're just gonna do some very basic stuff. Pick a length we like, snip with our little scissors. To use this, if you decide to use it, is very easy. You go ahead and extend out the piece of metal here. Once the metal is extended a little bit, you just need it out enough where you can thread it through the eye of the needle. And now you can see my needle is on here, being hung on. You take the tail end of your rope, you can see it here. We're gonna thread it through. And now I've got a little bit through, and then I'm just gonna come over and grab both the pieces at the same time. And now you can see I kind of have them tight, and then grab the needle. And you're gonna push it till it pops through, and then just pull the needle along and the tail end will come out, and you're done. What I didn't know when I first started was I had too many strands on mine, and it was causing me to have to pull really hard and get it to bust through, and I was worried about stabbing myself with the needle. And no, you just need to pull hard enough, and if it's not coming through, it means your needle, the eye, is not big enough for the amount of rope you're trying to do. You might be able to get it through if you try really hard, but I just warn you, not all needles are the same size. So once you've got that in, your goal is to pull these two strands, make this needle be right in the middle of the rope. So you're trying to pull it to where these two strands match up on the end. And once they're about even, we're going to tie them together like so. Just one little knot. Basic knot. Now we've got two, we're tying, and now we've got a little knot, and we're just gonna do that a couple more times. This is to make sure that when we're pulling it through the fabric, it doesn't actually just come through all together and ruin the whole point of this. So this thing will anchor behind this to make sure nothing comes through. So we're gonna learn some really basic stitches here that I've learned, and even I'm not perfect at them, but this will help you start. So let's say our design here for the beginning, we take our marker, or we just start, and we want to do just a straight line, right? If you want to do a straight line, you're always going to start from behind your piece. So you can see the fabric, this is the back side of it, or we can see the inside ring, outside ring is the correct. So if you were going to display this on your wall, you could always tape a piece of cardboard on this after and no one will see the back. So for the straight line, we're going to find the beginning. If it's white fabric, sometimes you can look through it and see your line. I usually just start holding and looking with the needle tip until I found it. We're gonna push the needle through like so, grab it, and then just pull. Very important, you pull all the way through, so make sure there's some tension there. That's why you want this tight, you want everything tight, so when you release it all stays like how you had it. And then all you're gonna do is go maybe, I usually use the width of my pinky nail. That little distance there is pretty small. That's about how far the needle should travel between each one if you want to keep it nice. But as you go, you can learn how far you'd like it to go. You push right through and pull, and then keep an eye on this. Sometimes this will get wrapped up and you'll pull it tight and you'll cause a big knot. Usually the best thing you can do is use your needle tip to break apart that knot. But you pull through and boom, we've got our first little line right there. So if you were wanting to, you could go a stitch here and then you'd have a dotted line. If you want this to be a solid line, the important thing is what you're gonna do is stitch back through the hole right here. So you'll see there's the hole that the other one came through, and I'm putting the needle right into where that same hole is. So that way when I pull through, I'm gonna get something like this. So now I have an actual line. If I didn't do that, I'd just have a dotted line. So if you want something like maybe you're doing like some accent marks and you wanna have a dotted line, go for it. But if you wanna have a solid line, you need to go back through your last one. And we can even make this dotted line look better. This, by the way, is called a back stitch. Alrighty, so now that we've got it all through, we've got our line finished, we're gonna do something called the whipping, which is, this is called a back stitch right now. What we're gonna do is whip the back stitch, making it a whipped back stitch. So what you do, I came up right over here. You try to come as close as you can to this actual line. This is how I've learned to do it at least, and I haven't looked up too many tutorials, but this has worked for me. And I want this line to look more connected than a bunch of, I can see my stitches pretty obviously. So I pull through a line very close to the ending. And what you do is you go under this and pull, and I try to pull it straight to the left. If I pull this way, I end up pulling this whole knot over the wrong direction. So pull it straight, make sure it's taut, then you can go back, find the next bridge, the next part that you can get under, pull, 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 and you'll have your last one here, pull through. And now this line looks a lot more connected than it was. So if you drew a full circle, you could have done the same backstitch in small increments to make a full circle. So any shape you want to draw, you can accomplish with this whip backstitch. The important thing is that you just make sure that you're careful when you come through, that you don't accidentally like turn a corner and whip the wrong way where it makes it kind of pull out. You just gotta be careful which way you're going. But this stitch here, we can finish off by going ahead and going back through the first hole we made, because we're coming through here and now this is clean. What we do back here is we can find one of our little stitches and do the same kind of whipping motion. Pull this through, and then we can just make a knot like so. And I usually make a few knots so that if I run this through the washer, it'll hold. And in full clarity, I've not yet run through the washer, but this I imagine is gonna do fine, because I'm also gonna buy these iron-on patches that you can put on the back, iron down, and then they hold. But especially if this is something that's not going through the washer or gonna stay on a wall, that knot will do just fine. And now I have a resistance to being pushed, all that. As far as other stitches that we can go through real quick, just to make this easy on you, if you'd like, you can also do one where you just running dot, you just come through. Let's do right next to the last one. You could just go through like this if you like. Remember we talked about there's the back stitch to make it look connected, but then your other stitch is just, you know, you could come through, pick a little farther over, come through again, and that'll give us, we can just keep going and then tie this off whenever we're done. There are many other stitches out there, like how to make leaves and things like that, that you can look up. If you kept running these in series, if you came right next to the last one you did, and I come right back through as close to it as I can get, I'm gonna start being able to make something. So I could start to make maybe a long line, or I could start to widen it out to make a circle. You can get that kind of filled in by just going really next to it, next to it, next to it. I warn you, if you try to do this filling in and you're not pretty much precisely next to it, or you're not pulling tight, your rope's gonna start to fray and get kind of wide, and it'll make it look bad. So the tighter you can pull and the less like twisted you can make your string, the better it's gonna be. And in the end, all you have to do is tie off. And this sort of technique will allow you to make kind of fun things. Some examples, like my first one, all I knew was that back stitch, and this was the first thing I was able to make, just a little potted plant. And then as soon as I felt comfortable with that, doing the whip back stitch, I drew out a goose, and we have the silly goose. So you can make some pretty easy things, very basic, if you just draw out a pattern. I recommend try it out, see what fails, see what works, and get into it. It's pretty fun, and this way I can run to Goodwill and just buy a shirt, add a goose to it, and call it my own shirt, and it costs me like $3. So for me, this is a money-saving thing for shirts and different outfits that I want something that I see maybe on TikTok or Etsy that I think is just too expensive for me to be able to afford. So instead, I can maybe find a nice colored shirt at Hobby Lobby, or go down to Goodwill and find something and make something reminiscent of. I'll never be likely as good as what I'm seeing for a while, but failure is part of the steps. If you all enjoyed this, feel free to leave a comment, like, subscribe, I'd appreciate it. If you have any questions on how to do this, please ask. I'd love to learn more, and by you asking questions, I'll learn how to do certain things. If you have a design you'd like to see me do, I might try to make somewhere I just whip up a shirt real quick, or different things during DIY videos, if you have any, and kind of talk through the process. So like I said, any questions, leave them below. Thank you all for watching. Peace.